Hello, my name is Rajan Arora and welcome to my course Essentials of SQL Server Performance for Every Developer. You are watching the video of Module 4 Finding Performance Bottlenecks in SQL Server. Part 4 Finding the slowest and most expensive SQL statement. If you are new to this course, please start it from the course introduction video for better understanding. Thank you. One of the most useful thing you can do with the SQL Server DMVs is to have SQL Server gives you a list of all the statements that your application has run along with the execution statistics for those statements. If you are looking for some quick wins for performance in your application, this query is a great place to start because this immediately tells you what statements are performing well and what statements you need to target for performance tuning. So, how does SQL Server know this? Every time SQL Server processes a statement, it keeps track of the execution plan that it uses and some execution statistics about the statement and store this data in an in-memory structure inside of SQL Server. Since this data is in memory, what data inside the structure can and does change as new statements are run and old statements are cached out. But generally, you will have the last several hours worth of data available in the DMV that shows you this view. And this is plenty of data to get a strong pulse about what is happening with your application. So, let's look at this query. This query is based around the DMEXEC query stats view, and you can see that we are also pulling in the text of the SQL statement and the execution plan for the statement. This is handy to pull in the execution plan because if we do find a poorly performing statement, we can look at the plan being used and use the skills we have learned in the last couple of modules to analyze the plan for the statement. If we look back up towards the top of the editor window, we see the data that we are returning. We see that we have the SQL text like before, so we know what statements we are talking about. And then we have a number of stats about this statement, like the number of times that it's been executed, the average amount of CPU per execution, and the total amount of CPU across all executions. And we have similar measures for both logical I/O and elapsed time. One thing I do want to point out is that the total rows column here. This was added in SQL Server 2008 R2. So, if you are still on SQL Server 2008, you will want to comment this line out. What is useful to do though with this query is that we can take the result of the query and we can sort those results by various parameters. With this query right now at the moment, I am actually sorting by the average elapsed time. So, that's going to be statements that taking the longest. However, I could also sort this by the average amount of CPU time per statement execution or the average amount of I/O to find the most resource hungry statements. If you can also be really interested to sort the results by the number of execution, so you can see what statements from your application are getting run most frequently. If you see a statement that has a very high number of executions, maybe that statement is being executed inside of a loop and you want to rethink how you are doing that data access. Or maybe the data returned by that statement is essentially static. So you might want to consider if you could possibly cache that data. So like all the queries that I am showing you in this module, take a moment and experiment with these queries in your database. Because that's really the best way to learn how to use this query and what they can tell you. So let's go ahead and run this query. So this is what your data is going to look like when it comes back. And this is pretty straightforward to interpret this data. One thing that I want to point out is our time based measurements, which are the CPU time and the elapsed time column. These units are in microseconds. So we moved the decimal places over 6 places to the left. We can see that I have got a number of statements here that are taking over 5 seconds. And it looks like those statements are also using a lot of CPU. So if this was a real database, I did be pulling the SQL out of here. and then I did be scrolling over here to the right where I can see the execution plan for these statements to analyze what is going on. So you can see this query is very useful because it can help you immediately pinpoint any statement that are really slowing down your application so you can get those fixed. Even after I have tuned all of these statements in my application, I still like to run this query every week or so just to make sure that nothing has changed or snuck up on me in terms of a performance issue. Next, we are going to take a look at how SQL Server can give us some recommendation on if any indexes are missing in our database. If you like this video, please do share, like and subscribe to my channel for more such videos. Thank you and see you in the next video.